Chapter 281, The Hit. Disdain glittered in Tianli and Hao Li's eyes as they came to the second floor's hall and saw Jiang Yu and Chen Fei kneeling and fuming with anger. If these two fellas hadn't a big background, they would have been killed for daring to offend the boss. Tianli, let me free. Seeing Tianli, Jiang Yu suddenly tried to jump from the floor, but two big men held his shoulders tight, one of them punching him fiercely. Tianli sneered, "Don't try to struggle if you don't want to enjoy more pain. Your parents will be here shortly. If they don't want to discipline you, I'll do the task. Don't force me to become a killer thoroughly. Remember that." Dizzy after getting punched, Jiang Yu no longer dared to struggle. Kneeling, Chen Fei's eyes were ablaze. If he had not seen Jiang Yu being beaten, he'd have long since got up. Panting heavily, he glared and sternly spoke to Tianli. "Tianli, your everlasting feast hall may be very famous and has good business in Hong Kong, but you dare act against me. Just wait. You'll get fucked up. When that time comes, I'll make you kneel before me," screaming and wailing. What an idiot. Disinclined to bother with him, Tianli held her arms and waited. In front of the entrance of the Everlasting Feast Hall's North Restaurant, 10 men in a black suits and grim looks confronted Jiang Tianba, Chen Jianya, and Du Chongzi, who brought along 20 big men with them. The other men who were lingered around the vicinity also moved closer, and the number was nearly 100. "Step aside." Growling, Deng Zhen appeared with 2 big guards behind the 2 security guards. Suddenly, the 10 big men opened a path. Ruthless, cold light glinted in Jiang Tianba's eyes along with a tinge of killing intent within. He coldly looked at Deng Zhang and said, "Never had I expected that this small everlasting feast hall would go so far to be as crazy as this. This is Hong Kong, not Jingmen Island. Do you want to die for provoking us here?" Deng Zhen sneered, "If you think we're tired of living, just tell your men to act. Since you already made such a big fuss, surely you want to make trouble here, no?" Fuming with anger, Jiang Tianba gritted his teeth and said, "Cut the crap, where's my son?" "He's inside," said Deng Zhen. "Take us to see Tianli," said Jiang Tianba coldly. Indifferent, Deng Zhen replied, "You can come inside, but those men gotta stay outside. Jiang Tianba, Chen Jianya, Du Chongzi, each of you can take 2 of your men inside. Otherwise, I'll see it as you acting against us." Stepping forward, Chen Jianya said coldly, "You know who we are, yet you still dare to be so arrogant. It looks like the Everlasting Feast Hall has big guts, eh? But I want to see whether you really have the ability." Having said that, he nodded to the 2 big men behind him and took the lead to enter. Clashing with the people of the Everlasting Feast Hall was not something Jiang Tianba wanted at this moment. After all, his son was still their hands. He went inside along with his 2 bodyguards as the anger inside him blazed ever more fiercely. Following him, Du Chongzi took along Du Yang and one of his bodyguards and said indifferently, "Though my son is not in your hands, I also want to see whether your place is a tiger nest or not." Deng Zhen didn't reply. He turned around and took them toward the second floor. After opening the room to the hall, he walked straight toward Tianli and stood there silently. When Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianyu saw that their sons were forced to kneel on the floor and had obviously been beaten in the face, their anger immediately turned evident. "Good. It's really great. You're Tianli, right? I really didn't expect that you'd have such a big courage. It seems that this matter can no longer end peacefully," Jiang Tianba sternly spoke. Indifferent, Tianli said, "Just as well. Peaceful or not is not something you can decide. Were it for the boss having the final say, your son wouldn't be kneeling here right now, he'd have long been a cold, dead body. You dare!" Jiang Tianba shouted furiously. Looking grim and cold, Chen Jianya glared deeply at Tianli. His gaze then turned to Hao Lei, who let out a smile that was yet unlike one, and coldly said, "Chief Hao also wants to be involved in this?" Laughing, Hao Lei said, "If I don't join in, our boss will kick me. There's no way I can ask the boss for a favor, so I can only run over here." Brows furrowed, Chen Jianya asked, your boss. That means the Grand Fortune Jewelries and the Everlasting Feast Hall is owned by your boss? Hao Lei smiled, you're so smart, eh? But how did you give birth to such idiot son? TSK, don't tell me that your wife cheated on you and he's not your biological son? Asshole. Chen Jianya was shocked inside, yet he still angrily shouted. Seemingly not hearing Chen Jianya's shout, Hao Lei smiled and muttered to herself, it can't be right, though. If he's not your son, you wouldn't be running here to save him now. That's right. I believe that you father and son should have taken a DNA test. Looking at her angrily, Chen Jianya's vision turned to Tianli and growled, what do you want for my son to be released? Shaking her head, Tianli replied, it's not our place to say. Our boss is on the way here. So we have to wait for him about that. Who's your boss? Asked Chen Jianya coldly. Tianli mocked and sneered, you want to know about him? Then you gotta wait. Right at this moment, Du Yang, who was behind Du Changze, was looking at the miserable-looking Jiang Yu and Chen Fei. He secretly felt fortunate that he didn't affronted Tianli further back then, or else he would be kneeling there as those two. His father, Du Changze, however, had his brows furrowed deeply as he came in and saw Hao Lei. Never did he expect that the Everlasting Feast Hall and the Grand Fortune Jewelries belonged to the same boss. He knew about the Grand Fortune Jewelries, for it had quite the power and even monopolized some gold and diamond mines in Africa. The enterprise may look to have only a few billions of assets on the surface, yet no one knew as how much wealth they really possessed in the back. Astute as he was, Du Changze could see how fearless Tianli and Hao Lei were. Watching as Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianyu fumed in anger yet couldn't do anything, he wisely chose to stay silent. He had learned about what had happened today and it was evident that he could retreat. In the case he followed and Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianyu couldn't do anything to the Everlasting Feast Hall and Grand Fortune Jewelries, he could draw back and apologize directly. As for the case of his son being beaten, there was nothing he could do but to swallow it silently. More than 10 minutes later, Tang Xiu along with Mo and Zhang Xinya arrived at the Hong Kong's Everlasting Feast Hall site. The 10 security guards didn't know him but knew the Mo brothers as they saluted them and let them pass directly. Where's Tianli? Looking at one of the guards, Tang Xiu asked in a deep tone. That guard glanced at Mo and Mo. He instantly knew that the person should be their new boss as he quickly replied, she's in the second floor's hall. Nodding, Tang Xiu walked upstairs under the guidance of a few big men. As he came to the side hall, his vision swept the situation inside before landing on Jiang Tianba and the others. He then walked toward the chair between Tianli and Hao Lei and sat there. You're the boss of the Everlasting Feast Hall and Grand Fortune Jewelries? Coldly sizing up Tang Xiu, Chen Jianya asked in a sinking tone. He was secretly at ease since he had never seen Tang Xiu, thinking that Tang Xiu was not someone from some of the untouchable forces in Hong Kong. Tang Xiu took a cigarette from his pocket, igniting, sucking and puffing it out, without even paying attention to him. He turned around to look at Zhang Xinya and asked, do you want to wait in another room? If you stay here, I'm afraid that you won't be able to stand it. But don't worry, though. The Everlasting Feast Hall has good cuisines and drinks to serve, they should be able to fill your tastes. Coming along with Tang Xiu and even seeing such a scene here, it was out of Zhang Xinya's imagination. She knew a lot of people present here such as Jiang Tianba, Chen Jianya, Du Changze, and even Tianli and Hao Lei. She also clearly knew the true face of the kneeling silk pants, Jiang Yu and Chen Lei. I'll stay here with you. Thinking that Tang Xiu had once helped her, Zhang Xinya replied without thinking. Nodding at her, Tang Xiu didn't mind if she stayed. Right after, he turned around and looked at Jiang Tianba, Chen Jianya, and Du Changze as he pointed at the kneeling Jiang Yu and Chen Fei, asking, who are their parents? Stand up. Walking 2 steps forward, Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianyu shot a cold glance at Tang Xiu. Tang Xiu nodded, I believe you already know everything about the matter. Hence, I won't say it again. Give me your solutions. Sneering, Jiang Tianba replied, we naturally know about everything regarding this matter. I admit that it was my son's fault for accidentally hitting your car, yet you've gone too far. Let my son go and confess to us. Otherwise, this won't end peacefully. Nodding heavily at his answer, Qin Jianye said coldly, the only one who has the rights to teach my son is me. Whoever hits my son must pay with broken limbs and then apologize to him. Break his son's hands. Turning his head, Tang Shou said indifferently. Crack. Crack. The two big guys standing beside Chen Fei moved swiftly. With one holding his shoulders, the other hit Chen Fei's wrist. Such explosive strength directly smashed both of Chen Fei's wrists. Bastard. Chen Jianye violently raged as he dashed toward Chen Fei. Get lost. A sharp dagger instantly appeared in the big guy's hand beside Chen Fei and placed it on his neck. His eyes were icy, showing that he would unhesitatingly cut Chen Fei's throat if Chen Jianye dared to rush over. Chen Jianye's breath came to a halt and abruptly stopped his dash. Behind him, Jiang Tianba, who had his eyes bursting out with shock and fright. Even in his wildest imagination he had never thought that Tang Xiu would be so rampant and ruthless despite his young age. Just a word from Qin Jianye resulted in his son, Chen Fei's wrist to be broken. In an instant, he felt somewhat lucky inside that he didn't say such words, otherwise, the one who would have his wrists broken now would perhaps be his own son. Chapter 282, A Silent and Cold Massacre. Angrily laughing, Chen Jianye's eyes glared at Tang Xiu with blazing intent to kill. He raised his thumb and shouted, Great. It's just great. For many years now nobody dared to humiliate me like this. Don't use my son if you really got the ability. Indifferent, Tang Xiu said lightly, let them go. Yes. The four big guys picked Chen Fei and Jiang Yu up and pushed them towards Qin Jianye. Ouch. Ah. With two screams, Chen Fei and Jiang Yu tumbled, hiding behind them, hatefully glaring at Tang Xiu. Chen Jianye snarled, let's go. Slow down. Do you think the everlasting feast hall is someplace you can come and go so freely? Before you give me a confession, not one of you can leave this place. Tang Xiu sneered. Jiang Tianba stepped back and mocked, what? Because this is your turf you want to bother us? You can believe me or not, but I can demolish your everlasting feast hall within half a day. Giving a gesture to invite him, Tang Xiu said lightly, if you have the ability, bring it on. I saw the crowd you brought here when I came in. Call all of them inside. I want to have a look at what kind force you have. Staring blankly for a moment, Jiang Tianba and Qin Jianye nodded to each other and quickly gave a command to their bodyguards. Within just a few minutes, nearly 200 big men rushed into the front door of the everlasting feast hall. Only now did Jiang Tianba and Qin Jianye feel relieved. They already had their sons protected and had their henchmen surrounding them. As long as they issued the order, those on the everlasting feast hall's side would be miserably beaten to a pulp. Furthermore, their henchmen were also armed with guns. Once they acted, the bullets would be enough to kill them all. Du Chong's dozens of subordinates had also come inside. However, unknown to himself, he subconsciously put some distance between himself and Jiang Tianba and Chen Fei, joining his men. There's something wrong here. As careful as he had always been, Du Chongze was a discreet man. He had been keenly observing all the time. Either Tang Xiu, Tianli, or Hao Lei, there was not the slightest fear on their faces, they even showed disdaining expressions. This fact made him secretly vigilant. Furthermore, it was simply unfathomable seeing the guards in the hall only wielding daggers without even a hint of panic or fright. Rather, it faintly seemed that they were impatient to act. That's right. It was just like a war. But, 34 people fighting against 100 to 200 people? Instantly, Du Chongze made a judgment. The Everlasting Feast Hall absolutely had skills which were yet to be seen, and it was perhaps not simple either. I can't take action easily. Having decided inside, he retreated 2 steps backward. Tang Xiu. Standing beside Tang Xiu, Zhang Xianya fell into a fright upon seeing such a battle-ready parade. She stepped back half a step and grabbed Tang Xiu's shoulders. Patting her back, Tang Xiu looked at Jiang Tianba and Qin Jianya and serenely said, "This is your last chance. If you don't have any assurance, I'm afraid you'll be regretting this decision for the rest of your life." Jiang Tianba burst into laughter. "I've met a lot of idiots in my life, but such an idiot like you never once I've seen one. Can you see the situation you're in now? It's simply very easy for us to kill you if we want to." Laughing and sneering, Chen Jianya said, "That's true. We had no choice but to come here since you took our sons as hostages before. But now, what else are you relying on?" As the two spoke, their henchmen took out their guns and knives one after another, fiercely eyeing Tang Xiu and his men, just waiting their bosses give the order to attack. Clap. 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 Tang Xiu clapped and smiled. "This is great. Your courage is praiseworthy. What about the other one, the boss of the Du Kong winery? Du Chongsa, how about you?" Being silent for a moment, Du Chongsa quickly grinned. "As the father whose son had been beaten, naturally I can't stay indifferent. However, solve the matter between the two of you first, then we'll talk about the matter between us." Having said that, he gathered his troops and retreated more than 10 meters from both sides, showing that this was none of his business. Du Changze. Surnamed Du. Both Jiang Tianba and Qin Jianya were furious since they didn't expect that Du Changze would actually flee at such a critical point, pushing them to probe Tang Xiu. Tang Xiu smiled. "You're still smart enough compared to these two idiots. Anyways, you're Jiang Tianba and Qin Jianya, yes? Since you wanna play, I'll keep you a company. Except for the 4 of them, kill everyone else." The moment his voice fell, 4 figures belonging to Tianli, Hao Lei, Mo An, and Mo A instantly dashed towards Qin Jianya and Jiang Tianba. Their speed was exceedingly fast as the distance of more than 10 meters passed in nearly a blink. Poof. 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 The 4 people wielding their daggers dashed in front of Jiang Tianba and Qin Jianya and pierced their shoulders. In almost a blink of an eye, Tianli and Hao Lei caught them as they moved to the side and retreated, whereas Mo An and Mo Ao moved smoothly as though passing clouds and flowing water, unhindered. Their sharp daggers reflected the streaks of cold light which slashed the wrists of several big men accurately, causing their guns to fall. Kill. The dozens of guards of the Everlasting Feast Hall instantly dashed from the surroundings, with each wielding a sharp dagger, as though tigers rushing into a flock of hundreds of enemies. Sinister fire blazed in their eyes, locking onto the men with guns, their first target. Some enemies caught with friendly fire from their companions who were positioned backward as bullets pierced their bodies. Bang. Bang. The noisy sound of gunfire sounded in succession. Tang Xiu sat in a calm manner, whereas Zhang Xinya looked pale at his side with fear in her eyes, tightly gripping Tang Xiu's shoulders. At both sides, Tianli and Hao Lei grabbed Jiang Tianba and Qin Jianya with daggers on their throats. The one-sided fight carried on, bringing along pitiful screams. Blood splashed as bullets flew to all directions. Hundreds of men of Jiang Tianba and Qin Jianya were as though straws being cut by harvester, as more than 20 strongmen with guns had all been completely slain within just half a minute, whereas the rest were seriously injured. Puff. The relentless and ruthless killing shocked Jiang Tianba and Qin Jianya to the core as they looked aghast. Seeing the fighting scene, it exceedingly increasing their heartbeats. How can this be? Whilst enduring the pain from his shoulder, Jiang Yi muttered to himself as he felt shivers running down his spine. As frightened and scared out of his wits as he was, never would he ever imagined that the dozens of security guards of the Everlasting Feast Hall could be this powerful. Nobody amongst the subordinates he brought along were normal people or rookies, any one of them could fight against 2 or 3 people. Yet, they couldn't even defend themselves from the security guards of the everlasting feast hall. What and who are these people? How could they have such a powerful combat force as well as being ruthless and merciless? Some distance from the scene, the boss of the Du Kong winery, Du Chongsa, had fallen into a shocking fright due to the scene. Turning wide-eyed, he staggered backward with a terrified look. Never did he expect that Tang Xiu would be so unbridled and domineering to even order to kill right away. His men were simply inhumane, as each and every one of them was exceedingly powerful, as even guns meant nothing to them. This matter is way too big. Swallowing his saliva in desperation, Du Chongsa turned to the surroundings as the others were also dumbstruck and aghast. Glaring fiercely at his son, who had long turned pale, his focus went back to the fighting scene. 2 minutes later, only 30 men remained from all of Jiang Tianba and Xinjianya's henchmen. Terrified as they were, only fear could be seen on their faces as they rushed toward the door to escape from this living hell. As for Tang Xiu's side, only one of his subordinates died, whereas several of them were injured. However, right at this time, Mo An and Mo had blocked the hall's entrance along with other 4 men. Holding their daggers backhandedly, they glared ruthlessly at the fleeing 30 henchmen. Kill! The 6 figures gave them a fierce greeting. Stop! Stop! Terror and panic had devoured Jiang Tianba as only fear painted his face when he shouted aloud. A tinge of sneer and mockery emerged on Tang Xiu's face as he waved to Tianli. The latter immediately shouted, "Stop!" As she spoke, nearly 10 men amongst the 30 big men had already been slain. The killing had stopped. Tang Xiu flicked his cigarette but, accurately entering the pot on the corner 10 meters away. He gently lifted Zhang Xinya's hands from his shoulders and slowly stood. "Are you scared?" Standing in front of Jiang Tianba, he asked with a smile that didn't look like one. Jiang Tianba trembled and shouted angrily, "You're dead. You're so dead. You just killed so many people, don't you fear the law?" The law. Mockery and disdain were outlined on the corner of Tang Xiu's mouth. "I dared to order the killing, yet you think I fear the consequences? What is it? Your men can't resist and now you're using the law to scare me?" At the side, Chen Jianya took a deep breath. Looking at Tang Xiu, he said, "You win. We've lost. Say your condition and we'll end the matter today." Looking at his eyes, Tang Xiu let out a sigh before he turned to the 20 strongmen who were being besieged. He walked and looked at them, saying, "You're all unlucky to follow these stupid bosses of yours. I am quite a benevolent person, so I'll give you a chance to live. Do you want it, or not?" "We want it." Trembling with fear, those more than 20 strongmen hurriedly replied and nodded. They were afraid, so much so that they wished that what was happening was nothing but a nightmare. Chapter 283, The God of Killing. Waving toward everyone around, motioning them to retreat, Tang Xiu then gently moved his hands and feet as he smiled and said, "I haven't had a chance to work out for some time, so I'll accompany you to play today. Anyhow, there are more than 20 of you, I'll be taking all of you by myself. If you can beat me, then you can live. But if you can't beat me down, you will die. Hence, I hope you can display your real abilities." "What?" Everyone was stupefied, looking at Tang Xiu with an indescribable expression. Pointing toward Jiang Tianba and Xinjianya who had knives at their necks, Tang Xiu continued, "I give you my word that my subordinates won't bother you any longer if you can kill me, even your bosses will be fine and safe. They're so filthy rich, they surely won't treat you badly later. Come at me. I'm giving you an opportunity, so you gotta try and see whether you can seize it or not." Greed was one of humans' nature, whereas the instinct to survive would drive one to bring out their potential to the fullest. The 24 big strongmen quickly exchanged looks and nodded. Right at this moment, circumstances had forced them into a hopeless situation. The next fight would determine whether they lived or died. Go. The 24 men dashed toward Tang Xiu aggressively, as though a pack of wolves. Pairs of big fists whooshed and punched, hoping to kill Tang Xiu directly. Humph. Instead of retreating, Tang Xiu entered the fray as his right leg moved like a whip, crushing one of the strongman's fist and breaking his hand with a kick, following by hitting another man's hand and forcing him to stagger down to the other's body. Pang, pang. Tang Xiu moved and acted very fast, with a speed at least several times faster than the enemy's. In an instant, he had kicked 5 times and punched 7 times. Along with the sound of breaking bones, 7 or 8 strongmen screamed out and flew upside down. At this time, Tang Xiu's figure suddenly appeared as his pair of fists changed into fingers and seized the throats of the other 2 men, directly crushing them. It was simply a massacre. A one-sided slaughter. As though a tiger rushing into a flock of sheep, for each time Tang Xiu moved, it resulted in dead or disabled enemies. In the entire hall, everyone was aghast and stupefied watching Tang Xiu moving everywhere. Even the powerful Tianli and Hao Lei were no exception. They possessed powerful strength and experienced countless fights since the brutal training in childhood, yet Tang Xiu was still in his 20s? Such powerful young man at his 20s was exceedingly beyond their expectations. Amazing! Tianli exclaimed wholeheartedly. At this moment, a solemn expression could be seen on Hao Lei's face as she said in a heavy tone, "Boss possesses a powerful strength. Were it myself fighting him, I'd only last 3 moves before he killed me." Turning her head, a faint smile was outlined on Tianli's mouth as she said, "Don't forget who he is. For boss, he needs not give his all to kill these ants." Relieved, Hao Lei forced out a smile. "That's true. How could boss be compared to the average people? If little boss was also here, I'm hella sure she would be able to kill them in a flash." At present, the both of were impatient to get an opportunity, since once they could get that chance to get a peerless divine cultivation technique, they would also become a carp who would leap through the dragon gate. In a stark contrast with the thoughts of the everlasting feast hall's people, Jiang Tianba, Chen Jianya, as well as Jiang Yu and Chen Fei, the 4 of them were already deeply drowned in fear. They knew they were finished. Because the present Tang Xiu and those security guards of the everlasting feast hall were simply not humans. Not only was their combat force exceedingly powerful, but they were also ruthless. Now that the situation had come to this, they perfectly aware that their lives would come to an end. They could only regret provoking them. Had they known that Tang Xiu and the everlasting feast hall's people were this terrifyingly powerful, never would they dare to provoke them even if they possessed thousands of points of courage. May the heaven over us and the earth be my witness. If I don't die today, I must strangle this good-for-nothing son to death myself. Chen Jianya slowly closed his eyes as he whispered. Done. After having killed the last strong big guy, Tang Xiu flung the blood on his hand before he turned around and looked at Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianya. Then, his vision shifted to Jiang Yu and Chen Fei. Are you both mad now? Asked Tang Xiu, smiled faintly. At this time, Jiang Yu and Chen Fei were already frightened and weakly slumped on the floor. They were Hong Kong's playboys, arrogant, domineering and acted unbridled. But at this time, watching the death of hundreds of people, they were truly frightened and scared shitless. Where would they dare to be arrogant any longer? Puff. Suddenly, Chen Fei was as if filled with strength. He got up and knelt toward Tang Xiu, repeatedly kowtowing and crying, "Brother, I was wrong. Please have mercy and spare me. I promise I'll cross the street immediately when I see you later. I beg you. Please don't kill me." Jiang Yu kept still, but he was also crying just like Chen Fei, kneeling and begging for mercy. Tang Xiu shook his head. These silk pants hedonistic sons of rich parents who lived an extravagant life since childhood, were only chaps who had nature of fearing the strong and only dared to bully the weak. If you didn't hit them fiercely, they would never know what pain was. Yet, in actuality, the reason as to why Tang Xiu acted was not to kill, but to frighten, deterring his subordinates from the everlasting feast hall. Looking at Tian Lei, Hao Lei, and the Mo brothers who watched him in respect and worship, he knew that his purpose had been achieved. Thus, Tang Xiu didn't plan on killing Jiang Tianba and Qin Jianye. After all, too many people had died today. He had almost no personal contacts in Hong Kong and he didn't have the means to handle the collateral aftermath, as he was also too disinclined to waste time here. Before heading back to the chair, Tang Xiu looked at Zhang Xingye, who was frightened and looked pale, asking, "How was it? Are you afraid?" She stepped back half a step, lowered her head and didn't reply. Shaking his head, Tang Xiu calmly said, "I asked you to leave before, yet you didn't want to. I'm afraid that you are not suited to see this kind of situation. Anyways, I'll send you back." Zhang Shenya slowly looked up as her eyes fell on Tang Xiu. After being silent for a moment, she said, "Tang Xiu, killing people is not something good to do." Tang Xiu turned around and pointed the dead bodies everywhere and said, "These people are damned and evil. Were it not because I'm strong enough, the one to die would be me instead of them, even you'd also become a victim. Don't tell me that we're in a peaceful era, yet the law of jungle where the weak are the prey for the strong would still be there no matter what time it is. This path is the road that I will walk in the future, so don't use the concept and thoughts of ordinary people when you look at me." Zhang Shenya opened her mouth yet didn't know what to say. "I'll send someone to escort you back. It's already late and I think you no longer have the appetite to eat. Forget what happened tonight. Have a good sleep after you go home, there's still a new day tomorrow." After a moment of silence, Zhang Xingye silently nodded. Afterward, Tang Xiu sat back on the chair, receiving a clean towel handed by a big guy. He wiped his face, his hands and looked at the pale Jiang Tianba and Qin Jianye, saying with a smile, "How about you two? Is there anything you want to say?" Qin Jianye didn't say anything. Slight bitterness painted Jiang Tianba's face and sighed, "The winner is the king, and the losers will always be the villains. We have lost, and the loser must accept the defeat. If you want to kill, then kill us." Raising his thumb, Tang Xiu praised, "Good. You have self-awareness. You obviously know that you must die today. It's good to be tough in the face of death. However, I don't want to make your wish come true. And sometimes, even if one wants to die, it would be very difficult for them to get their wish." Coldness filled Jiang Tianba's heart as he growled, "What do you want then?" "It's not much. I'm going to let you go," said Tang Xiu. "Letting them go?" Jiang Tianba dazed with disbelief in his eyes, even Qin Jianye looked at Tang Xiu with an indescribable expression, thinking that he misunderstood what he heard. "It's actually very simple. As long as you accept several conditions, not only will you avoid the suffering of being beaten, you will also keep your life. And you'll have your old and comfortable life you're used to have." Taking a deep breath, Jiang Tianba asked in a heavy tone, "What conditions?" Tang Xiu said lightly, 49% shares of the Jiang Group and Wanyuan real estate are the first conditions." "Agree. No problem." Jiang Tianba and Qin Jianye answered without hesitation. Wealth was but merely worldly possession compared to life. Let alone the shares in their enterprises, everything would be gone once they died. The second condition is, their death has no relation to us. You'll have to take care of the collateral aftermath as well as put the news to the void. If any of this is leaked and there are any slightest mistake, I'll send some people to massacre all of your families." Satisfied with their answers, Tang Xiu continued. "Understood." Jiang Tianba and Qin Jianye looked at each other and unanimously replied. "If the Everlasting Feast Hall and the Grand Fortune Jewelries need some help from you in the future, you must do everything you can to help them. The time limit is 10 years. If you do well within these years, not only will I write off everything that happened today, I will also give you some rewards." "Agree. Agree." Jiang Tianba and Qin Jianye replied again. "The fourth and the last request is, send your two good-for-nothing sons abroad, Staying in the country will only make them waiting disasters. He waved his hand and looked at Tianli, assist them to dispose of the dead bodies. As for the aftermath, you're also responsible in assisting them. Also, you are to take care of the deal about the shares with the both of them. You will also decide whether to sell the shares or take the annual dividends. I'll sell them, Tianli said without hesitation. Tang Xiu smiled faintly, like I said, it's your call. Yes. Chapter 284, Paying a Visit. The Law of the Jungle. The strong preying on the weak. Having lived in the immortal world for 10,000 years, Tang Xiu knew very well about the profound meaning of this rule. Though the present time was not the era of being conquered and prospering and perishing when resisting, yet the essence of the principle that one should not provoke and attack others to avoid being attacked was still necessary to be held. He was not a ruthless butcher, but he killed without mercy. Firstly, he perhaps would be the one dying today had he not killed them. Secondly, they were not a good people as they had done numerous wicked deeds. They were untouchable by the law due to the formidable umbrella provided by their formidable background. Hence, he had to become a necessary devil who punishes evil, becoming the punisher to settle their evil deeds. Someone said that killing a bad guy may be the salvation of the common people. Tang Xiu's conscience was clean when killing bad guys, for the life of good people had its value, whereas the evil ones were worthless. However, he also found some interesting facts tonight. Tianli and Hao Lei, seemingly delicate and weak, were also experts Gu Yan had nurtured. Financial resources were the basic foundation for one's forces. The fact that Gu Yan had the both of them managing the everlasting feast hall and the grand jewelries showed that she had absolute trust on them, so Tang Xiu didn't question anyone Gu Yan had given her trust to. You did well tonight. Call Chen Xiaohua, who is responsible for the antique business, as well as Jin Chang, who takes care of the real estate business. Tell them that the four of you are to go back to Jingmen Island and see Ji Qimei. Tell Ji Qimei that under my command, she is to teach the four of you what she taught Mo An and Mo Ao, said Tang Xiu as he slowly stood from the chair with a faint smile. What? Tianli and Hao Lei startled, a disbelieving light bursting from their eyes. A few seconds after, the disbelief turned into an intense ecstasy. They were excited. The both of them had always dreamed to learn the cultivation technique to obtain immortality. Finally, this dream had come true. Ignoring them, Tang Xiu lit up a cigarette as he walked toward the panicked father and son of the Du family and said lightly, since you chose to wait for me to solve the other two before you speaking, then, do you want to speak now? His mouth twitched a few times as Du Chongsa fiercely slapped Du Yang's face and bellowed, kneel. Panicked and scared, Du Yang immediately knelt in front of Tang Xiu. While wiping cold sweat from his forehead, Du Chongsa said bitterly, you're surnamed Tang, right? That big star seemed to call you that name before. Boss Tang, my son has made a mistake, which is very unusual indeed. Yet I want to ask your forgiveness, please spare his life. I have many businesses, so it's difficult for me to decide which company's share I should give you. How about I pay you 2 billion as a token of apology? 3 billion. Then you can get the hell out. Inside, Du Chongsa was secretly relieved, since he could solve the problem with money, which in itself was not a big deal. His wealth was worth tens of billions, and even though 3 billion yuan was an enormous sum, he could still afford it. In regard to this, the 49% shares of Jiang Group and Wanyuan Real Estate were basically the root capital of Jiang Tianba and Xinjianya. Might I ask you to give me some time, Boss Tang? I can come up with 3 billion, but the time is too short. 3 days, that's all I can give you, said Tang Xiu indifferently. All right, 3 days is enough, said Du Chongsa hastily. Tang Xiu waved his hand, all right, you can leave. Do remember. You may favor your son, but watch him lest he repeat his crime. Hastily replying, Du Chongsa said, I'll certainly discipline him after I go back, to ensure that he will no longer do any kind of evil deeds as well as provoke the right and do the wrong. Looking at Du Chongsa and his dozens of frightened men leaving, he suddenly spoke, "Leave all of your guns here." "All right." Without waiting for Du Chongsa's command, 7 or 8 big guys carrying guns hurriedly dropped them on the floor. For them, Tang Xiu was a fiend, the cruel and ruthless god of killing. If they dared to go against his wishes, they would perhaps be unable to get out of the everlasting feast hall alive. A few minutes later, Tang Xiu and the Mo Bothers left the everlasting feast hall on the Hummer back to Qianshui Bay Road 13th. He still had to leave for the Nine Dragon Island, so he needed to have a good rest. At Deepwater Bay 79th Road. Sipping their teas, Li Jiren and Cushion Tao were having a chat. "Boss." A big bodyguard came before Li Jiren with a queer expression on his face. Li Jiren furrowed his brows and asked, "How's the result of the investigation?" "We have yet to investigate Tang Xiu's identity for the time being, but I have already talked with my contacts in Xuanqing province, so we should get the results shortly." However, there was a situation in the everlasting feast hall. According to our findings, Tang Xiu clashed before with a group of young masters. The eldest son of the Jiang Group's owner Jiang Yu, the heir of Wanyuan Real Estate, Chen Fei, the young boss of Du Kong Winery Du Yang, and Qi Chengxing from Kongyang Electric Appliances. When Tang Xiu was attending the auction, the general manager of the everlasting feast hall, Tian Li, took Jiang Yu and Chen Fei away. After Tang Xiu rushed thereon, the boss of the Jiang Group, Jiang Tianba, the Wanyuan Real Estate's boss Chen Jianya, as well as Du Chongsa from the Du Kong Winery brought along 100 to 200 men to the everlasting feast hall site. Afterward, Tang Xiu also arrived there. Li Jiren squinted his eyes and slowly asked, "And the result?" The big bodyguard forced a smiled. Jiang Tianba, Jiang Yu, Chen Jianya and Chen Fei left the everlasting feast hall first with some injuries, but their men who had followed them inside didn't come out with them. As for the father and son Du Chongsa and Du Yang, they also brought dozens of men there, but all of them came out from the everlasting feast hall's front door. And Du Chongsa hit his son, and seemingly quite hard at that. Li Jiren's brows furrowed deeply and asked in a heavy tone, "So your point is, the everlasting feast hall have Jiang Tianba and Xinjianya's men as hostages, no?" The big bodyguard said, "No. They died." "What?" Li Jiren and Cushion Tao suddenly stood, looking shocked. "All of them died?" 100 to 200 men entered the everlasting feast hall and, aside from Du Chongsa's men who came out, did the over 100 men die inside the everlasting feast hall's site? Knock, knock. The door was knocked. A panicked big middle-aged man strode into the room and said hastily, "Boss, the dozen men we sent to the everlasting feast hall to monitor the situation there, just cut off their communication with me. However, before I lost contact, one of them told me 2 words." "What are those 2 words?" asked Li Jiren in a deep tone. Cushion Tao asked, "What 2 words?" "Save me," said the big middle-aged man in a sinking tone. Li Jiren took a deep breath as he smiled bitterly and shook his head. "This is the same with the situation in the past. I didn't expect to repeat the same mistake again. It seems I've to make a trip there yet again." Having just woken up from his shock, Cushion Tao quickly said upon hearing it, "Uncle Li, you mean that you will go see Tang Xiu personally to ask him to release your men?" Forcing out a wry smile, Li Jiren said, "Except for that, what else can I do?" The former boss Gu was powerful, but she rarely commanded a wanton slaughter. Tang Xiu actually. Alas. I should do everything I can. "I'll go with you, Uncle Li," Cushion Tao said quickly. "No," Li Jiren shook his head, "I'd better go there myself. It won't be good if you follow me. Send someone to find out Tang Xiu's residence." The big bodyguard said, "We have found his residence. It's the Qianshui Bay Road 13th. Nodding, Li Jiren brought along 2 big bodyguards, boarded the car and left quickly, quietly followed behind by several cars. At Qianshui Bay Road 13th. After coming back, Tang Xiu took a shower and changed his clothes. Just as he prepared to immerse himself in cultivation, his room's door was knocked. "Is there something?" asked Tang Xiu after he opened the door. Mo An respectfully said, "Boss, Li Jiren is visiting." Tang Xiu squinted his eyes and instantly understood the reason and intention of his arrival. However, Li Jiren's status alone was rather distinct. Despite having no interest in his wealth, Tang Xiu nodded and said, "Take him to the living room, I'll be there shortly." "Yes." Mo An replied and left. Pondering for a moment, Tang Xiu then put on his shoes as he turned and walked out of the room. It wasn't easy to conceal what had happened in the Everlasting Feast Hall today. After all, a series of gunshot sounds would surely attract others' attentions. It may even have alerted the police. Li Jiren, who had been living in Hong Kong for most of his life, must have a personal connection in the political field, and it was surely because he wanted to preserve the lives of those subordinates under his command. After having ordered the nanny to prepare good tea, Tang Xiu went to the living room. "Little brother Tang, we meet again." Having just sat on the sofa, Li Jiren stood again as he smiled upon seeing Tang Xiu. Letting out a light smile, Tang Xiu replied, "It seems the fate between us runs rather deep since we're meeting twice within this short night." Forcing out a smile, Li Jiren said, "It's quite deep indeed. Not only with you, I'm also fated with your Everlasting Feast Hall. Anyways, I sent some people to investigate the Everlasting Feast Hall in Jingmen Island in the past. The result was that those men of mine had all been captured and sent to a mining area somewhere in Africa, becoming coolies there." "So, you know what happened tonight?" asked Tang Xiu lightly. Nodding, Li Jiren replied, "Yes, I heard about it, so I came to ask if little brother Tang needs my help. Either business or politics in Hong Kong, I do have some means to get through." The corner of Tang Xiu's mouth slanted as he smiled. "It seems that Elder Li came for my help. Such being the case, I'll take your kindness. Come, let's have some tea." Glancing at the nanny who came to serve the tea, Li Jiren hesitated for a moment before speaking in a low voice, "Little brother Tang, my men." Waving his hand, Tang Xiu said, "Elderly, my tea may not be as good as yours, but please don't refuse it. After you have tasted this tea and then returned back to your home, I'm sure those men of yours should have returned already." Taking the hint and understanding its meaning, Li Jiren felt happy and laughed, "Little brother Tang, to be frank, I also still owe a favor to the Everlasting Feast Hall. It's been more than 20 years since the last time I saw Boss Gu. Has she been well?" Chapter 285, Wasting Money. Tang Xiu raised his brows. "You know Yen?" "Yen?" Stunned, Li Jiren stared blankly and confused. "Little brother Tang, who's Yen?" Tang Xiu calmly replied, "Gu Yen." Surprise flashed in Li Jiren's eyes. He had never thought that Tang Xiu actually called Gu Yen like his children. It had to be known that more than 20 years ago Gu Yen looked like she was in her 20s. Thus, wouldn't it mean that she was more or less around 50 years old now? "Yes, it's Gu Yen, Boss Gu. More than 20 years ago something happened, an accident in my side that I needed to transport one batch of imported goods from abroad, hence I thickened my face to ask Boss Gu's help." Tang Xiu surprised, "Did she help you?" Nodding, Li Jiren said, "Yes, she did, and it saved me from a huge loss. But she didn't want to be paid, she just requested two things of me." "What did she ask of you?" asked Tang Xiu curiously. "First, I must not send people to investigate the Everlasting Feast Hall ever again. Secondly, she wanted me to find a man named Tang Xiu and even gave me his picture. Even though you're also called Tang Xiu, but his appearance is somewhat different from yours." "Tang Xiu?" Inside, Tang Xiu secretly sighed. The appearance of the man in the picture was certainly different from his. How could his appearance in the immortal world be alike with his at present? "It seems Yen has really done a lot for me. Elderly, I hope you no longer send people to investigate me if possible, because even if you do, you probably won't find anything." Also, it's been 10 years. Yen is not in a good condition. Hence, she no longer manages the Everlasting Feast Hall. The one who is managing the enterprise is her apprentice, Gu Xiaoxue. Anyways, I might have to trouble you to look after the Everlasting Feast Hall in the future, said Tang Xiu with a smile after he sighed emotionally. Li Jiren's expression flickered and replied hastily, taking care of the Everlasting Feast Hall, please consider it done. However, how about Boss Gu? Do you need my help to find a doctor? I heard that a divine doctor appeared in Shuangqing Province's Star City. If you like, I'll go there myself to invite that divine doctor to Jingmen Island. Looking at him with a strange expression, Tang Xiu was at a loss whether he should be amused or upset, saying, the news about the divine doctor in Star City spread out this fast, even reaching Hong Kong? Li Jiren laughed. Recently, I also heard from my old friend in the capital. He said that Tang. Suddenly, the smile on his face froze as disbelief filled his eyes. What's with this Tang? Asked Tang Xiu, confused. Staring blankly at Tang Xiu, Li Jiren then asked, as far as I know, the divine doctor in Star City Chinese Medical Hospital is also called Tang Xiu. That old friend of mine in the capital said that the head of the Tang family of Beijing, that man, not only had his asthma cured by Tang Xiu, this Tang Xiu is also his biological grandson. You come from Shuangqing Province, don't tell me. Tang Xiu couldn't help laughing. Please say no more, it doesn't matter. Now you know much more than those subordinates you sent to investigate me. Yes, the Tang Xiu in Star City Chinese Medical Hospital is indeed myself. But my present status there is not of official doctor. As for the Tang family, Tang Yunda is my father and Tang Guisheng is my grandfather. Hiss. Li Jiren was shocked and terrified by Tang Xiu's identity. If Tang Xiu was only the descendant of the Tangs, even Tang Guisheng's grandson, he would probably not be shocked. But to think that he was also a divine doctor. More importantly, Tang Xiu was also the owner of the Everlasting Feast Hall. With so many identities lumped together, despite he himself possessing extraordinary status, he was still frightened somehow. Don't be so surprised. If I could cure Yen, I would have already done it. After all, she's my favorite apprentice, said Tang Xiu lightly. Nodding and recovered from his shock, Li Jiren said, since you're also a divine doctor, naturally. Once again, his words came to a halt. An apprentice? Did Tang Xiu just say that? Gu Yan is his favorite apprentice? Wah. What kind of joke is this? Tang Xiu explained no further and only watched Li Jiren's shocked expression. He shook his head. Anyhow, I want you to keep my relation with Yen confidential. Also, if you nothing else to say, you can return. Li Jiren didn't move. His eyes fixated on Tang Xiu. This young man before him was as though a mysterious being that was shrouded in obscurity. Then I'll take my leave. Seeing Tang Xiu's intention to send him out, Li Jiren got up and replied. Sending him off, Tang Xiu then turned back and went upstairs. Today's killing didn't have any negative impact on him thus far. Hence, he sat cross-legged on the bed and began his cultivation. Persevering in his cultivation, he could, at any time, break through the flesh-strengthening stage. As long as he reached this stage, his strength would soar exponentially. He might not be able to call himself invincible all over the world, but there would only be a few people that could be his match. Sim Sha Sui Residential Area, Hong Kong. Within a hall of a European-style luxurious villa, Du Yang knelt in front of Du Changsa with a face full of regret and remorse. Because of a small conflict, their family must pay a compensation of 3 billion. Though he used to be arrogant and uninhibited, right at this moment, he fully realized he had committed a big mistake. Prior to this, he had been punished and was forced to kneel. It made him angry, and though he admitted his mistakes, yet it was on the surface and insincere inside. But at this time, he didn't have any complaints. Do you know your mistake? No longer beating Du Yang again after dozens of hits, Du Chongsa sat straight on the sofa with coldness gleaming in his eyes, whereas his wife, Bai Yu Qin, looked at Du Yang's swollen face in distress, wanting to speak yet keeping silent. Yes, father. I know my mistake. Looking up, Du Yang said bitterly. If you know your mistake, then redeem yourself. Otherwise, by the time you manage our family's businesses in the future, all of it will only be wasted by you sooner or later. If it's like this, I might as well donate the money to charity before I die. Doing this will at least maintain our good reputation. Du Yang took a deep breath and replied solemnly, Father, had this incident not happened today, I might still do the same things like I used to, but now it's different. What I saw today was the most terrifying and frightening thing in my life. I swear to you that I will no longer blend in with those bunch of hoodlums, and neither will I waste time and stay idle anymore. I will help with the work in the company. And even if you throw me to start from the bottom, I'll accept it. Watching the serious and solemn appearance his son put on, Du Chongsa finally felt gratified somehow. Yet, the 3 billion yuan compensation was something that would create a tremendous impact on his business once he collected the money, and gave it to the other party. Get up. Slowly standing up, Du Yang spoke after being silent for a while. Father, how much do you know about the everlasting feast hall? What's this surnamed Tang person's background, and how could he be so terrifying? Letting out a bitter and forced smile, Du Chongsa said, You ask me, but whom I should ask? Had I known they were this powerful, would I ever take you there? Alas, let's forget it. At least our family is still fine and kept the majority of our industries and saved dozens our subordinates. But Jiang Tianba and Qin Jianyu kicked a sheet of iron since they lost at least 2/3 of their family's assets. You all really can't let anyone feel relieved. Du Yang lowered his head before suddenly looking up, staring blankly for a moment and saying, Father, there was someone else who was involved in today's matter aside from me, Jiang Yu and Qin Fei. I still remember Tang Xiu saying that he wanted his elders to come and apologize. Who's he? Surprised for a moment, Du Chongsa asked. Qi Changxing, said Du Yang. Blinking his eyes, a stream of light suddenly flashed from Du Chongsa's eyes as he asked in a deep tone, Don't lie to me. Was Qi Changxing really involved in this matter? Yes. But he hadn't got beaten, said Du Yang with all seriousness. Du Chongsa hummed coldly. He took his mobile and dialed number. Sim Sha Sui, at Beverly Hotel. Holding a crystal cup, Qi Changshan was attending a banquet of his friend in a luxurious spacious hall. A gorgeous crystal chandelier illuminating soft light with each angle reflected light as though an imaginary kaleidoscopic light, in a dream. Stylish European-style tables and chairs and small exquisite bars were painted with a pure white color, exuding an aristocratic ambience and atmosphere. Ring. Ring, ring. His merry chat abruptly stopped by the ringtone of his mobile. Giving an apologetic expression to the people around him, he took his mobile and quickly left his seat after he saw the caller ID on his mobile screen. He walked to the outside and laughed. Brother Du, what's up? I have a news to sell you, a solemn voice belonging to Du Chongsa came out of the phone. Surprised, Qi Changshan stared blankly for a moment as his pace abruptly stopped, asking in wonder, What news? Don't ask for now. If you want to buy it, you must transfer 500 million yuan to me. After you find out about the matter, you must transfer another 500 million again. I don't think 1 billion would be too expensive for this news, said Du Chongsa deeply. As Qi Changshan looked cloudy, he lightly said, Brother Du, how do I know if this news is worth 1 billion yuan if you don't tell me about it first? Brother Qi, how many decades has it been since we know each other? Do you really think that I'm the kind of person who likes to cheat and con others? I can tell that if you're left in the dark tonight and don't do anything, you'll probably end up badly, so will your Qi enterprise? The price you will pay would perhaps exceed 1 billion later. What do you mean? Startled, Qi Changshan knew Du Chongsa's disposition for he had never talked without weight. Now tell me, will you buy it or not, said Du Changze. After being in silent for a moment, Qi Changshan slowly said, I'll agree if the news you provide is truly worth such a high price. But if it's not, I want my 500 million yuan returned to me, brother. Do you'll have the money in your account shortly? Deal. The call was ended.